Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Real Woman New Zealand. Now, I'm pretty sure we are around week 6, and we are also here with Katrina tonight. So where are we? We are 30th of May, the Real Woman in NZ panel. Welcome to the audience. It's great to see lots of you have already tuned in. Now, we have to give our apologies from Azian and Bronnie, so our 2 other panelists are not able to get online tonight, so we will see them next week. Now, tonight you're in for a bit of a treat because we're talking about the government amended Birth, Death, Marriages and Relationships Registration Act. And now that's what most of you have come to know it as, the Self-Identification Law, which allows anyone to change the sex on their birth certificate. But we'll have Katrina talk more around that shortly. Just before we do though, so this is about on the 15th of June this year. It's locked into place, a done deal. Now, this was originally led by Jan Tinetti, the Minister for Internal Affairs at that time. However, wait for it, Jan Tinetti is now also the Minister for Women. Katrina, would you like to delve into this, and then we can ask you some questions? And yes, we're looking at the comments coming through. It's great to have this audience who like to participate each week, and we'll have time for your question and answers towards, after Katrina's shared a little bit. So take it away, Katrina.
Sure. What I'm going to do is I've actually written an article about it and published it on my Substack, and I'll put the link for that in the comments afterwards. So I'm just going to basically walk through this walk and talk through this, and just to discuss the points in it as I go. As Helen said, the sex self-ID law becomes in law on the 15th of June. And it means that any man or woman can change, and children can change the sex recorded on their birth certificate to that of the opposite sex, no questions asked. And in addition, you're going to love this, in addition, there are 2 other options that can be chosen. One is a non-binary gender, and the other one is another gender. And that's no kidding. You can have on your birth certificate another gender.
What does that even mean?
Who would know? I mean, no one can really define what gender means. You have your own personal description for it, and there are some sort of some social descriptions as well that we think about of gender. But really, when it's a personal thing, it can mean anything really. And that's one of the difficulties of actually putting it into law, is that it cannot have a consistent definition for it. It's not like your sex can. And we know that, we know that there are variations.
I just have to have a wee giggle. We were waiting to see if somebody would notice that we decided to identify as different people tonight, and somebody has. Well done, Nicole. So Nicole has said, hi, Jack and Kev. Love it. Exactly. So that's the whole point. I'm Jack tonight for a little while anyway, and Katrina's Kev, and this is the ridiculousness of it. Yeah.
There really are no boundaries for this. It's a Ministry for Women. Our councils are basically saying that you are just what you say you are, and so that, for the next hour we're going to be Jack and Kev. And that's how silly it's become.
And apparently there's no medical evidence required to actually prove that you're a different sex or anything. You can just rock on up and
you fill out a form online. There may be I can't quite remember now. You may have to sort of wait a month or something like that. Fill out a form online. Anyway, it's simple. You fill out a form online. I don't know if there's going to be a fee yet. There used to be a bit of a fee to cost for it. I don't know if that's going to be scrapped or not, or whether it's just going to be, if it's not scrapped, it'll be peanuts, and you can do it unlimited times. This is the other thing. You can do it unlimited times. So you can change your...
So we could go in as Jack tomorrow and then go back out as Helen the next day and then just keep changing because it's fluid. Our gender's fluid.
Might wait until you get... you might have to wait until you get your confirmation, your new birth certificate through before you can do it again, but this is... you could actually end up with multiple birth certificates. They do get changed at the Department of Internal Affairs. They would get registered and the changes noted there. But you could end up with, pieces of paper with, multiple names. Maybe not names, but genders and sexes on them. The names are changing in
you're right, because how does that work? Once you have that birth certificate, then you can go and get a passport with that name, and then potentially you could put that away for a rainy day when you've gone back to your other gender, your original gender. So you can choose which passport to use depending on where you're going. I don't know why you'd want to, but it's just a little bit.
Well, as you know, it was passed unanimously in Parliament in December 2021, which I'm sure if you'd been there, Helen, it wouldn't have been.
Correct.
And these issues were brought up about the opportunity for fraud and things like that. And I can't quite remember. I did read at the time that it was sort of like they were a little bit flippant about it, like, fraud is illegal, so there would be you'd get into trouble if you did that. That was their
yeah.
That was it. That kind of thing. They were so hell bent on getting it through that nothing was going to stop them, and this is the kind of thing that I found going to the councils and to MPs is that no matter how good your case is, it just made little impact because they're just so hell bent on doing this. And why exactly? I mean, it's a bit of a mystery really as to why they have such an intent on doing this, and as I said, the councils that are swimming pools, both in Christchurch, well, probably in different places around the country, but Christchurch and in Invercargill we know of definitely, and our Christchurch City Council has said in writing that basically, a woman is anyone who identifies as such. They can go into the women's sessions that they bent over backwards to create. And anyone can go into them. So anyway, it's what it's done is it's made the birth certificate quite a sort of an invalid document almost, or it's a vanity document, definitely a vanity document, because it's something like for people who change it, it's just something like because that's how they feel inside. So it's sort of like a bit like for just self-gratification. And it's like if you produce it anywhere now, people can be sort of like, oh, is that really who they are? Is that, their real, I mean, sometimes it'll be obvious, of course, that, somebody's got on there another gender as their recorded their sex mark or whatever. I mean, it's going to be a bit weird.
It's mind-boggling, actually. I mean, you talked about this being, it's an important document. I mean, birth certificates are legal documents and supposedly be a reliable, trusted evidence of who a person is. But like you said, how can anybody now, after June the 15th, knowing that different identities can be just so easily gained. It's a wee bit like, well, not the same, but with the census this year, there's so many people now that don't hold faith in that whole process because of the questions that were on there around gender.
Yeah, and they were on that note, just on the census. It was I'm not sure if we discussed this or not, but it was noted that in the UK, they found out that there was a higher percentage of Muslims that were actually transgender, and it was just the ridiculousness of the question and being misunderstood. That's what.
Well, either that, or they actually understood it and decided that they wanted to just, play around a little bit, because
perhaps, but I'm suspecting it was just the question was misunderstood, and.
Well, look, and just adding to that as well, Katrina. Sorry, but just adding to that as well, Katrina. When we're at school, for example, the children are given questionnaires, around all this gender stuff, and so they're ticking, these tick boxes, and then the statistics that come out say, oh, now we have this many children identifying on the rainbow, or on the gender spectrum, because they don't understand what it all entails, and they don't, it's like, oh, this is a bit of fun, I'm going to identify as whatever I choose now. This is so not serious, and yet it is taken serious, because we're looking now at data, and they're using those statistics to create this whole new generation of different genders, which is so false. False.
And when you're younger, you've got your life ahead of you. The whole world's sort of like your oyster type of thing, and you really don't think it's that important about what you decide who you're going to be at the moment. What you tick, what boxes you tick, or anything like that. It's you really. Well, that's how it has been, and you really feel like you can change it, but it's a little bit strange now, and that you almost sort of get boxed into it. You don't sort of kids aren't being sort of told, oh yeah, no, that's sure, be like that this week, you can be different next week or anything. It's a bit like if you decide that you are trans or something like that, that's your identity set now, and it's
or a cat. Or a cat.
Yeah.
Is anyone going to actually identify as a cat on their birth certificate? No, this is serious stuff. So I'll be talking about this next week with a student. But anyway, there are students identifying as cats. So Sue Reid has just talked about the fees for amending sex, as you said, on the birth certificate. Currently costs $55 and $35 for a new birth certificate. A name change costs $170. The new law allows multiple changes. Yeah, thanks, Sue. What do you think about that? I mean,
I think the fee is going to be reviewed, and as I said, my feeling is that it will be like $10 or something like that.
Of course it will be.
$10 at some stage was discussed, but I don't see that anywhere at the moment. Now, when the sex self-ID law was being discussed, even the Department of Internal Affairs at the time were against it. We're against this with sex self-ID, and I'll just read out what they said. Because a birth certificate involves core identity information, any potential law change has wide-ranging implications. A birth certificate forms the basis for information on other official documentation, such as passports and driver's licenses. Passports and driver's licenses are considered transactional, documents that involve less formal processes, and unlike a registered birth record, they can be revoked. So even the Department of Internal Affairs didn't think it was a good idea, but as I said, there's just been this whole attitude of being hell-bent on putting it forward. However, there is a bit of good news, believe it or not. All the activism that was done around this, which a lot of the audience now are probably unaware of, it sort of all flew under the radar. It was big for us at the time, those of us involved, but it flew under the radar for the majority of New Zealanders. But what happened is that there was a clause. In the end, a clause was added to it, and the clause basically said that any other relevant information can be taken into account to ascertain a person's sex. And a birth certificate is not definitive or the final proof of a person's sex. So that's quite good news. So that means that your eyes and ears, if your eyes and ears tell you that someone's, someone who's he's a woman is actually a bloke, you can say no. You can basically not believe them. And even if they pull out a birth certificate, you can still say no. Who knows if you might get it wrong sometimes, but you can basically believe your eyes and ears now. Now the other thing that's really significant is that in this clause 79, as I said, all this will be in the article I've written, which I'll put the link to in the comments afterwards. It says any individual, private sector agency or public sector agency authorised or required to ascertain an individual's sex or gender for a particular purpose may take into account either or both of the following. And it's the information contained in the certificate or other relevant information. But the really significant thing is that they say sex or gender. So that means that they're recognising that sex and gender are different things. So that actually is really big because of the fact that how the Human Rights Commission are trying to obfuscate it. And when that talks about, we have sex-based rights, they're trying to say, oh, yes, but that just means gender as well, gender identity as well. So anyway, I believe
has that been added since? Sorry, Katrina, has that been added since? Because Sue was asking, wasn't there a clause?
Right. Okay. Back in 2000, I think it was 2000. Let me have a look at my story. Back in 2018, when the Green Party tried to sneak it through, sex self-ID through as along with amendments to the births, deaths, marriages, relationships register, that clause wasn't in there.
Okay.
So that was added after, and then so anyway, what happened is that it was trying to put it through on the quiet, and this has happened in a few places, like in Ireland, for example. It was sneaked through in the Marriage Equality Act. Everybody, marriage equality, and this was sneaked through with it. So anyway, New Zealand, sometimes being a little bit behind and stuff like that, sometimes you sort of get a chance to catch up on some of these things. And some women cottoned on to this, that what was happening, and they actually sort of started making a bit of noise about it. And in the end, it was New Zealand First MP Tracy Martin who put a stop to it, who said, hold on a minute, what's this? This needs more discussion or whatever. But it was a bit like, you could see, I saw some snippets of the process of where, and it might have been Bob McCroskey who did it, the Family First sort of snippets, where there was Chloe Schwarbeck. It might have been who's the is it Iranian? Is she Iranian? The other queen. Anyway, they were basically sort of Goldritz. Yes, Goldritz, and it might have been her. They were basically saying
Gloria Goldritz. Yeah.
Yeah, and excuse me if it's not her. They were basically saying, oh, well, nothing to see here, just a few minor changes to blah, 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 and sort of like putting it through like that so that everybody in Parliament would say, oh, yeah, okay, yeah, tick, 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 sign off, Next thing, please.
Yeah, well,
So
that's yeah, we've got a question about that, Katrina. There's a question here around that. She's asking, where are we? Shirley's asking, yeah, was the sex idea posed by other parties within Parliament? And if not, why not? So is that what you're saying now? Because it was just so, kind of airy-fairy around, oh, yeah, nothing to see.
No, at the time, at that particular time, Tracy Martin stopped it. And that's what went on pause. And it was resurrected once Labor got into power completely. But at the time, and when they did and resurrected it, and as you know, there were those submissions, which some of us may have seen with, those terribly behaved politicians.
Oh, yes.
But when it was passed,
Doctor, the one that's got the doctor that has a little bit of a history now of being a wee bit of a bully, even in Parliament, within her own Parliament. Actually, is she still there? I don't know. Yes.
No. So it was Deborah Russell, Rachel Boyack,
Dr. Elizabeth Kitty wasn't there. Yeah. Oh no, she was. That was for another.
Louisa Wall. I think they were the main four who, because they rotated a little bit. Some others came on. I think they were the main four who were shocking, really shocking in their hostility towards anyone who presented, well, especially towards, Beth Johnson from Speak Up for Women, when she presented hers, they were especially hostile towards her. It was really unprofessional, really.
It is, because that's the right of every citizen to submit, and to be treated like that is appalling for government ministers who are there to serve and represent people. It's absolutely appalling.
So at that time, when they were making the submissions, at that time, that clause had been added by that time. It was, to try and, I suppose, to lessen the awfulness of it. But as I said, it's really significant that they've named sex and gender separately. They've said sex and gender. And I believe that Speak Up Women are going to write a bit more about that. So you can keep an eye on their public Facebook page. They're bound to publish something there. But that does mean that service providers cannot sort of pretend that gender or sex, if they say, how can I phrase this? If you want to, you can argue the point with them. If they say they're having a woman's session, then you can argue your point with them that doesn't include anyone who says they're a woman. However, the downside of that is that they can make whatever policies they want. So they
yes, but you would yourself that they come back and say, well, we're actually following the human rights, what it states in there about no discrimination around gender, etc. So they always come back with that one, don't they?
And that's not actually, there's nothing about gender in the, let me have a look at my reading. There's nothing about gender in the human rights. Sorry, I'll find it in a minute.
Oh, no, you're probably right. Yeah.
There's nothing about gender in the Human Rights Act. It's about sex, but it's just that the Human Rights Commission have decided that it includes gender. That's their policy. It includes gender. It's not actually in law
yet.
It's not. Yes, I mean, who knows? They might try it. Although, as I said,
There will be the campaign. They'll be campaigning to change that, won't they? I mean,
Yeah.
we know that
I mean,
the activists will be campaigning to get that in there. They're already talking about it in our law lectures. We've had those conversations.
it's just,
Coming.
I think the big difficulty is defining what gender means, what gender identity means. I think that is quite a sticking point.
Yeah.
And
you could ask Chris Hipkins to define it, what gender identity means.
Yeah. And I think it would, I think changing the law, like so many laws, there'd be so many laws that needed to be changed. If you started saying, like making gender identity a protected characteristic, I think it's quite a big job to actually do. But the government, though, the government it was spotted, and on one of their websites called Human Rights and Freedoms, they've got a list of unlawful discrimination, and they have listed gender identity in there, and that's wrong. It's incorrect. It's erroneous. Yes, they shouldn't have it there. That is it's just terrible. I believe that they have been notified. Someone has notified them that it's incorrect, but so far it's still there. I mean, that's just really shocking that they have listed that as unlawful discrimination on a government website when it's not. It's not listed anywhere as unlawful discrimination.
Well, it's good that there's lots of watchdogs out there keeping an eye on that, and that just reminds me. There's a comment from Shirley. Katrina Biggs, you have been an amazing outspoken advocate on fighting for the rights of real women. Well done. And she's right. There's you, and I know there's dozens of other women out there who are standing in this space, whether it be Speak Up for Women or, like you said, Family First. There's so many people that are standing up and trying to protect. And I'm sure there's people in law as well who are working on that.
Yeah, there are. So that's the sex self ID sort of law, is that you can a birth certificate is not definitive proof of a person's sex, no matter what it says on it. You can use other information, relevant information, and that can mean just what your eyes and ears tell you. It also very significantly differentiates between sex and gender. So that's quite significant.
Okay. So to have this, right. So to have this done, though, Katrina, you talk just for the process of actually getting this going. From what Sue has told me, Sue, who's also in the space. She said that you need the third party to help with the legal process. There's a choice from two groups. I don't know, you probably know this, but you've got the registered professionals like the doctors, psychologists and psychotherapists, etc., social workers, nurses or counsellors, or the other group is any person aged 18 years and over that has known the child or young person for 12 months or more. So you'd probably be aware of that. But children up to 15 years of age, they've got this restriction, need their parent / guardian and a third party, but 16 years over just need someone who has known them for 12 months or more to make the legal documentation change. So that's it's it's so alarming, the fact that you've got the two different groups. It's such an easy way to it could be anybody that's known you for 12 months. I mean, how do we know that that person has got a credible indeed.
It's like you could drive a truck through the loopholes on it. It's just it's terrible. But
well, look, most of the laws that the Labor government have pushed through have so many flaws, and the thing is, it's the rest of us who have to pick up the pieces from the fallout of this. I mean, you're talking about we've seen overseas what's happening, the experiences and that fallout from self-ID laws. The trouble is, like you said at the beginning, New Zealand's always behind the 8 ball and a bit slower, obviously. So, this is sad, but we're about to experience some of our traditional spaces and places that will be tested under this new law. And it's our women and girls that are going to get the brunt of this in some of those spaces.
Yeah. I mean, the Department of Internal Affairs on there, they have a frequently asked questions webpage, and they make it clear there that a service provider can still provide a single-sex service, and that's not going to change. And it all depends if the service provider wants to. At this point in time, it seems very much like they're being directed by the neo-rainbow groups and lobbyists. And we know really that they're really pushing a trans and queer agenda as opposed to sort of like the rainbow agenda, because they're if they were really advocating for the rainbow, then they would take into consideration, they would take lesbians into consideration who may not want men in their spaces. They're women, they might not be, but they don't. That's just irrelevant. So we know that really it's a trans, I call it the TQ agenda, the trans and queer agenda is what's been pushing. And for some reason, they've just captured people in government and councils and organisations. I mean, I believe the Warehouse is doing a full-on sort of rainbow thing. I think, like lots of marketing rainbow clothing and stuff like that. I'm not sure.
The money, the marketing.
Yeah. Just
it's a shame that, like you said, they're using the rainbow now for their own self-gratification and leaving out, basically, like you said, the owls and others. So it's almost like the rainbow, well, we know that the rainbow can have different meanings for different people in our communities anyway, but to still be calling it rainbow community when it's got the LGBT, etc., you would think there's something you can do about that in itself, because they're speaking for all of you as if you all agree with what these processes are. So,
to be honest, the LGB it's just the vehicle for the TQ plus I, whatever, and and it's almost, I mean, they may be getting to the stage where they don't need it anymore. I don't know, but basically the LGB is just the vehicle to get the the TQ and everything into law, into policy, into society, as social structures and stuff like that.
Well, maybe that's a conversation that we need to have to, that stops being used in that sense. Now, there's a few questions and comments, so I'll just throw up a couple. Have Ms. Annie Cole said, that's the problem with the affirmation model. There's no going back for these kids. Oh, yeah, I think she's mentioned something about this earlier. Even if they mean it when they say they think they're transgender, how do they explore changing their mind if everyone's agreeing with them and it's potentially illegal to offer opposing opinion? And now what Nicole's talking about is illegal around that because of the new amendments in the conversion therapy bill. It was already in the criminal act, to do conversion therapy as such, that extreme version of it. But we're talking now, I think this is what Nicole means is, for parents to even say to their children, to guide them and actually say, well, this might be just a stage, let's go and talk to somebody about it. But they're pushing this whole affirmation model, which we're going to delve into a lot more in the coming weeks. And it's no different here. Like, they're going to change the agenda on the birth certificate, but like what Nicole said, well, what if they change their mind? They're not going to have that option, because it's like it's just another way of locking them into their identity, isn't it?
If they can if they feel they can change their mind, they can about the birth certificate, but
true. It's back and forth.
It's a little bit. I know what she's saying is like, like when we were younger, it was like you could chop and change who you said you were, what you identified as, or anything like that. It was just really normal. We went through phases and stages. And I mean, I do remember, like sometimes my younger sister, for example. I mean, maybe I did the same thing by coming home one day and saying that she wanted to be called by a different name, and my mother just, did it for a wee while. It didn't last long, and that sort of thing. It was just being young, young. You're just exploring. You're just whatever.
Well, I believe.
Around
I believe the whole gender non-binary thing is just rebellion, basically, against norms and systems which we've all been through. I mean, let's face it. I don't know if I should admit this, but I was a punk rocker way back when I was 14. And you remember? Do you know what that is? So what that became gothic, right? Goths, and then emo. Emo. So I was, that's now showing my age now, but I was that. I did the Doc Martens and decked out everything black. I mean, it's a stage.
Look,
but
Helen, I tell you what, there's people like your age, upwards my age, whatever, and there's a common refrain is like, thank God there was no internet when we were younger.
Oh my gosh. They're going to have a double mastectomy because I don't want my puberty. And oh my gosh. I mean, puberty is uncomfortable. There's no doubt about it.
You did some stupid things when you were younger, when you were a young woman. You did some pretty stupid things, and that's all part of being young and, growing up. But, and you had no internet now to record it and keep it forever.
Oh gosh. Yeah. I know. The memories are bad enough.
Yeah.
Right.
So anyway, Jan Tonetti, yes. You said that you wanted. I've got a couple of things to say about her as well, but you said you had something you'd like to say about her.
Look, I just mentioned her in the fact that she is our women's minister, and you didn't hear a boo out of her around the whole process with the Speak Up for Women. The speaker, when we did the Albert Park, there was not one peep.
Let women speak.
Yeah, let women speak. Not one. She didn't address any of it at all. And here is the Minister of Women. I mean, she's also the Education Minister, so you can see what's happening there. Actually, today she's in a lot of trouble. So, I really wish that they would put some credible people into positions. That. It's no wonder that education's a mess, although it has been a mess for quite some time. I'll let you do that, and you can jump into that space, Kev.
Yeah. I will just sort of say that getting decent people in Parliament is a bit of a two-way street, because I think we have to sort of, even though we get angry with them, we have to still address them, not viciously. And if we're going to, if people in Parliament are going to get all this viciousness, and I mean some of the really, really horrible stuff, then you're not going to get the best people in there, So, and that's just, as I said, it's a two-way street. So anyway,
I agree.
Jan Tonetti. She was hell bent on getting this through. Now, she said that I think she duped us, I feel. She said, she talked about the sex self-ID bill, and she said, however, if any unintended consequences do arise, we have built in a statutory review of the self-identification provisions 5 years after the commencement of this bill. And it sounded like they were going to implement something where they would measure the impacts, maybe assign some sort of official agency to collect data, and anecdata, which is basically people's stories. And then I had a subsequent conversation with somebody from the Department of Internal Affairs, and she said, no, that's not going to happen. The review is only going to be a review of the processes to see if they're working okay or not.
Mm.
And I think, well, what does she, that I felt that was a really misleading statement she made. However, if any unintended consequences do arise, we have a built-in statutory review. Now that sounds to me like it sounded to so many of us that they were going to actually sort of do some sort of impact assessment on it, for women, but not. No. So that was
not at all.
No, and and the this anecdata makes up a substantial portion of the case for self-ID. There's very little in the way of stats that make it up. Like, for example, the common one is like men who say they're women aren't safe in the men's toilets, and that. Well, where are the stats for that? That's why they've got to come in the women's changing rooms and stuff like that. Where are the stats for that? Yeah. So, and they talk about, like they talk a lot about being killed and stuff like that, and that's not actually true either. My understanding is that the ratio is roughly the same. It could be a bit less than the ratio of what women get killed. Now, the numbers are way tiny, of course. There has not been a trans person killed in New Zealand in the last more than 10 years. But I think if you ratio it, it's roughly about the same as what women as women get killed. So they're not, there's no sort of genocide going on that's
exactly
something like this. Yeah.
And we already know that it's a problematic, this whole collecting stats for any of this, because I see, actually, it's funny, I'm just thinking about how you said where are the stats, and yet every time now that there's a trans person who actually commits an offence, they're very, very quick to add those stats to women committing an offence.
Oh, yeah.
So, for example, really fast to do that, but yet the other side, and so that's really skewing the data around women being violent. Criminals. We know that's
I know that stats from the UK, and I haven't got them from here yet, but I expect they'll be similar, show that men who say that they're women are imprisoned for sexual offences at more than twice the rate of other men. So when you think about that if those are going to go into women's, now as I said, once again the numbers are tiny, because the population of men who say they're women is tiny so far. But because women commit very, very, very minuscule amount of sexual offences, you can imagine that just even putting one or two extra people in there, who commit a sexual offence is going to actually make the data, almost blow out. Like it could kind of like double, in a few years. Technically, showing that the number of women who commit sexual offences. So, so it's really quite bad. So what else have I've got in here?
While you're looking for that, Charmaine, she's just put a comment. I'll just go through a few comments while you're having a look there. So Charmaine said, I think they're probably at risk of being attacked by men who won't tolerate their queer, unnatural behaviour. Well, whatever it is, none of us condone, violence of any sort, obviously. But yeah, the whole point is, of course, we would want them to feel safe wherever they are, but they don't need to be overtaking the women's safety of, our spaces to appease their safety.
Yeah.
So Nicole, are we Jacqueline Biggs? Is she related to you? So,
yes,
Nicole Evans, don't know. As for some reason, maybe it's because it's a Zoom. Oh, it can't be opened. Oh, sorry, they're just doing their own private conversation. I think they're sharing some information as an aside, which is great. Actually, it's really good to see the audience having conversations with each other as well. That's so cool. Well done. Really nice to see tonight, the audience. It's great. Lots of names that I recall each week too. So it's great to have you on board. We welcome all of your comments and your questions. I'm sorry if we don't get to all of them. I'll just throw a few. We should boycott the warehouse, says Vanilla. Look, and what you're talking about with the warehouse, I know that countdown is really, that pretty scary. They ask their customers, would you like, I mean, oh, hey, boycott that.
They haven't asked me yet.
What should women do if they, maybe they know. Well, what should women do if they encounter a biological man in female space once this law comes into force? Okay, Katrina, what do you think we could be doing to support women who, I mean, well, have you come across this? I have. I've seen. Yep.
I personally haven't encountered it. I've heard stories of women who have. First of all, no one needs this law. No organisation needs this law to allow men who say they're women into a woman's space. They can just make their own policy for it, and that's it. What you can do is argue against their policies, and in the actual moment when you encounter a man in a woman's space, I don't want to advise anyone what to do. I mean, some people say that they will actually shout the house down, make a hell of a fuss, and that. Most women, just sort of leave as fast as they can the situation. The whole thing is any man who breaks that social contract and goes into a woman's space is not going to be the sort of man that you may want to argue with. He's so disrespectful of your space, of woman's space, probably extremely narcissistic. Just the mere fact of him coming into that space may mean that he's not going to be, you could shout, if you start shouting or yelling at him, he may get quite aggressive back towards you. There's no way of knowing. So I can't advise anybody on what to do when they encounter man in the woman's space. Unfortunately, if it's a policy of the organisation, they probably won't accept a complaint because if their policy is anyone who says they're a woman is a woman, then basically to them you're complaining about a woman in a woman's space, even if that woman's fully intact male. So they won't accept a complaint or lodge it. And that's where it comes to the other disingenuous thing that gets said about, I think Jan Tonetti has also said, she's not the only one, but so far, we haven't received any complaints. This is what the Christchurch City Council says too. But if there's no avenue for making a complaint, if there's anything, how can the complaints be received or counted? They say the same thing.
So Nicole's just responded. Nicole's just responded to your comment as well. Thank you, Katrina. What groups would be interested to hear about our experience to unite our voices? Well, obviously you've got Speak Up for Women who advocate in that space. I imagine that Nicole could make contact with her. Katrina, you're in touch with Speak Up for Women.
Yeah.
Would they? I mean,
They're
obviously
not actually. Yeah, as far as I know, they're not actually collecting those stories. There is a website called No Conflict. They said they've been collecting those stories. What I
so
feel.
that's a New Zealand
It's
based.
Australian, Australasian. It was started in Australia, but it's Australasian, and they've actually got stories from around. It was who's that philosopher? Holly Lawford Smith started it, and I believe someone else has taken it over. But I think that one of the things that's crossed my mind is to lobby for some sort of organisation or some sort of official recognition to collect these stories. Because as I said, like Jan Tinetti, I mean, she could be questioned, what did you mean by saying if any unintended consequences arise? How are we going to measure those unintended consequences if we're not collecting stories?
Well, they're not collecting any data. I mean, we have trouble trying to get data about how many children are seeing, counsellors, etc., around gender dysphoria. They're not collecting this data. And so how do we then support and find out children who have gone down that track and then wanted to get out of that track as well? Who's looking after them?
Yeah.
And that's a real concern. It's something that we should be asking for.
Because I mean, we could start. I mean, an organisation could just start collecting the stories off their own bat, but whether or not they would be recognised in any way as unintended consequences of the sex self-ID law, I don't know. I suspect that they would be brushed aside as not being official or something like that, or whatever. So that's something that I think that could be done, is to lobby for some sort of group that can collect the stories, the data, and have the recognition for doing so. Who's going to start that? I don't know.
Yes, agreed. Well, it looks like, we might have to do something in that space. So we've got here Sharon Marie's made a comment. My husband told me to tell him to get out. We need to be brave and stand up for our rights, and I will protect my granddaughter at any cost. Look, I mean, obviously that's, everybody who's watching, you'll do your own thing. I think Katrina just is making sure that we're not advising, we're not here to advise people on what to do. One of the reasons we're actually one of the reasons we're actually online now and not speaking out in the streets is because we realize that it's not the safest space to be at this time, and that's why we've gone online. So we certainly wouldn't be recommending that you approach any of these people. Although we'll do our own thing. I mean, I very well might say something myself, but I don't know until you're in that position. Like Katrina said, some of these people might be a little bit unhinged, to be honest. Not somebody you want to mess with.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and they and you don't know who's going to side with them either. One of the things that they do now is kind of come in with a human shield, like they'll have a woman accompany them, or one or two women accompany them to protect them. And so you don't know whether, like they might all have a go at you if you make a fuss, or there could be other people in the change room or toilets who decide, that you're the evil one for making a fuss and side with this bloke, and it could make things really, really bad for you.
And like Virginia has just said, really shocking that we cannot complain. It's utterly discriminatory against biological women. Even having to have this conversation, Katrina, it's shocking that we have to do this. We've got where are we? Rhonda, hang on, just before I go there, I want to see Joanna, unintended consequences, violence, intimidating, killing.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, one of the things, another thing that, I mean, I keep on referring to Jan Tinetti, but she's not the only one. But she does say that there's no evidence that it's going badly in any sort of other countries where it's been implemented. But once again, there's no evidence being collected.
Yeah, I agree with Joanna. Joanna actually thinks that Jan's a little bit in La La Land. And yeah, I see that even with her education stand on different things. So completely agree with you though there, Joanna. Sorry to interrupt, Katrina. Keep going. I'm just trying to get through some of these.
One of the I've had this come to me more than one time, then when as evidence is that the only thing that's ever been produced is an analysis from 2018, about July 2018, that was done in Massachusetts, USA, where they looked at public records to see if were any problems with men, who say they're women going into women's spaces, and they ascertained from that there was no problem. Now, one of the reasons of that, of course, is that public records basically mean, I suppose, police records. And I don't know if like would be like a complaints ledger from public service organisations or what. But we all know that 90% of anything that happens to a woman that doesn't get a complaint, doesn't get made, and certainly you don't go to the police about it. So we know that is a really false comparison, I suppose you could say, or false sort of way of doing evidence. And
yeah, you're right. I mean, and the protections.
A woman should know that.
Yeah, it's really misleading as well because they're talking about the law that gives protections and discretion for the gender confused people, but what about the protections for the women who are being impacted? So it's quite misleading, the whole conversation around it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely misleading. It was very much, I mean, I quite like using this, the Kiwiism, like, oh, she'll be right. So, very much like that,
Yeah, look, I'm aware that we've only got a few minutes, so we'll just go through a few of the comments, Katrina. Maya, if we tell a trans to get out, are we doing anything illegal? Absolutely not. Well, I mean, what are they going to do? Take you to court because you think that there's a male in the toilet and you're telling them to get out? I mean, there's nothing legal at this point apart from the whole discrimination thing around sex, but it's still not anything that could be used against.
It may be against the policies of the organisation or the service provider that you're at. You might be acting against their policies, but you're not acting illegally.
Yeah, I think I did hear something recently where somebody did something like this, and it was actually the organisation who told that person that they were being discriminatory. So yeah, it's not actually, you're not going to get hurled off to court, but the organisation, say the council, intervene and tell you that,
Yeah, and they might trespass you. That's the other thing.
To that person.
Yeah.
Maybe. Sorry. Yeah, we have a criminal sexual conviction. Can you change it? Good point. What do you think about that, Katrina?
I haven't looked into that.
It's something good to look into because I was wondering. Yeah.
I get the feeling that
I think that
won't be held against you. For example, the police are able to get information about a person's sex, and if they've changed their sex on their birth certificate. They can get that information. Joe Public can't, but the police can. Actually, yes, I know. I believe that question has been raised, but I can't remember what the answer to it was. Sorry.
Actually, it's also a real concern, because I'm thinking about when you're working with children, for example, you need a police check. So does the person that's got the new identity, would they, there's such a thing as where they wipe a police criminal record. But, I wonder, how this would fall into that, especially for getting the police vetting checks where people are working with children, how that will impact.
Yeah.
Something to look at. I think there's some good points that we need to actually look into. I feel like we've got some homework, Katrina. Yeah, it's okay. It's good, though. We do need to have these things brought up. So, Louise, has anyone mentioned the woman in Norway where just after self-ID was passed, she challenged a man in the changing room and he tried to have her charged with harassment? Oh, she fought it through the court for 2 years and wasn't charged, but the process is punishment. Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
I did hear about that. Yeah, and it's possible that could happen here. As I said, if a man who says a woman is allowed into a woman's changing room at an organisation, and you challenge him, he possibly could have you up for harassment.
Yes, and Danielle has said, working with children, they should run through the database, surely. Well, that's a question I think we should add to the police, put it out there. We've got some good data here. It's going back to the days where women wouldn't speak up when they have been sexually abused or assaulted. It's a worry. Okay, so we've got Charmaine. Fingerprints can't be changed. Okay. Okay. Look, thank you for all your comments. Thank you for your questions. I'll just run up a few more here in case you want to finish up with anything, Katrina. Really grateful that you've been on the show for the last 2 weeks, Katrina. It's so nice sitting next to you again in the panel. Hopefully you will. I hope that you'll come back on another time or more.
I'm sure I will. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty much the gist of it. Is just what I've been through. As I said, I'll put the link to my article in the comments, so anyway everyone can read through it and get the full story.
Yes, there's a link here too. Sorry, a link from Maya. Did you see this one? That link there from Maya. We have a trans woman who raped a man, though. Okay, I don't know.
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Well, I mean, whoever's looking at here online later, they can go through that people can go through these questions later on. And if you've missed anything or if I haven't put something up, we'll endeavour to answer. Try and answer these at some point later. But thank you everybody for all your comments. So, Katrina, was that all you had for tonight?
Yeah, that covers the main things. Yeah. Good one.
Yeah, so we've got some thanks here. Nicole has said really helpful discussion. Thank you, Valda. Thank you, Kev and Jack. And Virginia, thanks very much. Sharon Marie has said, thank you, ladies. Yeah, thank you all. Thank you, ladies in the audience. Actually, there were no men tonight in the audience. Did you notice that, Katrina? Usually we have...
No, I can't see them, actually. Yeah.
No, usually we have the odd bloke in here. So I hope we haven't scared them off, because we do. And, it's really good to have some men standing up and make... Yeah. Actually, so for next week, I'll just announce next week we are...
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, shall I? All right. I'll just say one thing is that what can only be done is to target your service provider. I mean, as I say, they're allowed to make the policies they want to make, but is to actually target them and basically say that, you know, like they don't have to, this is not the law, they don't have to allow men who say they're women into women's spaces. If they do it, they're only doing it because they want to, and you just have to target them to actually put forward women's cases. And you've got to, the women's case, and you just have to be quite bold, really, in doing it. That's the only way
Yeah.
to do it, is to change individual service providers and saying, you're not legally obligated to do this, and this is why we don't want you to do it.
That's right. If you don't say anything, they'll think, well, no one's complained and there's been no problem. So you have to speak up. Therese, thank you. Awesome to listen. Just a couple more comments coming in. Where are we? Sorry, there's just before we go, Jude Hall, thank you, ladies, women, female persons. Yes, we are. Sharon said that her husband is in the background, so he is there. So we do have a man. And this is a really good one from It's a good one from Louise. Thank you, ladies. It's such a relief to know this is being discussed. And that's the key thing to take away, is it's really important to talk about anything that concerns us. We shouldn't be, this whole free speech thing. It's really important to have speech. Even if you don't agree with it, we can still actually, have robust discussions and debates. We don't have to agree with each other. We should not be trying to close down speech. So thanks, Louise. Base department. Who's that? Did I miss something there? Bias department. Yvonne?
I'm not sure. I've got a feeling it's...
No, I didn't.
Yeah, I've got a feeling it's...
Okay.
Not complimentary.
Okay. Jude, United We Women Stand. Yes, we do. It's an invaluable forum. Okay, well, that's good to know. We will keep it up. So we'll be here every week. And speaking of that, next week, Virginia and ladies and gentlemen who are watching, we have a wee treat as well. So I interviewed a 15-year-old high school student over the weekend from one of the high schools here in Christchurch, and he has revealed some information that you'll all want to tune in to listen to. It's quite revealing, not only about the, the things that we talk around, the gender and rainbow issues in school, but just education in general. So jump on next week where you'll hear my interview with him, and then we will be talking about some things related to Pride Week, which is the week after. I'm also doing an interview with Reality Check Radio. So actually, I think that will be aired the day after this broadcast anyway. So that's okay. We'll keep at it, and we'll have some plans further on in the year as well. Now, Yvonne, just last thing she said, because we didn't understand it, thank you, Yvonne, it's a compliment. Okay. Thank you for clarifying. It's nice to have compliments. Okay, good stuff. Hey, thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. Lovely to see you all. Good night.
Bye.